Hello Yu-Gi-Oh players, I'm the RJB0, and welcome to... Oh! Look! Up in the air! It's a bird! It's a plane! No! It's a deck review! Anyway, this week I decided to change things up a little bit, since in the past I have always done my deck reviews on valiant Tier 2 decks that have proven themselves in the heat of battle. And I realize that although those decks are incredibly entertaining for me to make reviews of, they are not particularly useful to my viewers, since my viewers can go out there and find the winning deck profiles themselves and be like, oh, that's how that works. Well, I didn't need to waste my time on that idiot, so instead, I am deciding to focus my reviews around coming attractions, decks that are maybe in the OCG, or have been announced, but have not quite made their way to the TCG yet, so you guys get a sneak preview of what's to come in the near future, and I get to test out some awesome weird decks from Japan, so it's pretty much a win-win situation. Anyway, let's get down to the deck review. So as soon as I made this little epiphany, or you can say revelation, I suppose, I decided that I absolutely had to go out and find the weirdest deck possible from Japan to review, and as a result, I have discovered the wonders of Chain Beat. What is Chain Beat, you ask? Well, that's a pretty good question. You should probably let me know if you figure out the answer, because I've been playing this deck for 2 weeks and I still don't have a better explanation than it's pretty much the insanity of Chain Burn minus the stupid. I will have a skeleton and some usual useful cards and text and stuff in the description, as I usually do, or I used to do at some point. But for a basic idea in this video, what you do is you put a bunch of monsters that can dodge card effects, things like Verz Thunderbird and Wind-Up Rabbit and Winged Rhinos on the board, and then you chock the board full of trap cards that can clear the field and keep control over the board, and that you can chain your monsters to. And then once you get those monsters on the board, and you get that back row set up, it's really difficult for your opponent to set up a field, and even harder for them to get rid of your monsters. So, of course, I always like to start with, what did I like about the deck? Well, I guess I'm going to go on another little tangent here. So I also play Magic, and I don't play Magic quite as well as I play Yu-Gi-Oh, which is saying something, but I have a lot of friends who are Yu-Gi-Oh players that hate Magic, and Magic players who hate Yu-Gi-Oh, and they always are asking me which I think is a more skillful game, and my answer is always this. I think that both games are equally skillful, but where Magic is very strategic, Yu-Gi-Oh is very technical. And I mean that, and it is absolutely exemplified in this deck. This is Yu-Gi-Oh at its most technical. The entire strategy of this deck is building up chain links properly so that you time your card effects and make sure that you somehow gain advantage over your opponent. It's spectacularly difficult to play, and I love that because it makes me feel like I am getting better at the game. It's got crazy mirror matches. I mean, I have never seen the word chain used so many times in a single DN duel, and the rabbit matchup is tons of fun. But as a competitive deck, as somebody who is considering playing this deck in the future in a competitive format, what do I like about this deck? Well, it's a powerful stun deck, which is, if anybody who has ever watched my channel knows, my style of playing. It's very difficult for your opponent to set up a board that can take you down, and like I said before, it's even harder to take out your monsters. Once you've established a field with this deck, it's very difficult for your opponent to take it away from you. I can't even think of, like, that's enough to take down a ton of decks. It can also main Macrocosmos, which is amazing, and it can make really good use of Cardcar D, and you can use Pot of Duality even after bringing your monsters back, and it is really great, and you can do some crazy toolboxing using Tour Guide and going into Zen Mighty and putting a rabbit on the board, and it is just awesome. I really recommend you guys just trying this deck out for yourself, because no amount of reviewing I can do can give the weirdness and the wonderfulness of this deck justice. So now that I've talked to you guys up about how awesome the deck is, I should discuss how it is taken down. Well, Decree sucks for this deck. Decree is horrid. If your opponent puts Decree on the board, you're in some serious trouble. Really, that's pretty much the end of the game, which is why you often main 3 MSTs in the deck. If you want to take out their monsters, then you have to get to the top of the chain or put a monster on the board and attack without letting your opponent chain any cards so that they can chain Thunderbird, because if you can get out of that Thunderbird with a monster, they can't just randomly banish it like Rabbit can. So you can get rid of them like that, but really the best way to get rid of their monsters are to warning them, to put Decree on the board and then run them over, or to get to the top of the chain link. And what I mean by that is, like, if your opponent summons a monster, and then, or if you summon a monster, your opponent activates Torrential, and then they chain their Rabbit and their Thunderbird and whatever, and once they've done all that chaining, you chain your own Torrential or a Needle Sealing or something, then you'll get rid of their monsters and their banishing effects won't be applied. So that's probably the best way to get rid of their monsters, which is why this deck is really hard to bring down, because that in itself is a very difficult situation to set up and replicate. And the worst thing that has ever happened to me while I was playing my Chain Beat deck was my opponent summoned Bamboo Shoot by sacking an Echuria Cherries, and I couldn't do anything. I couldn't get over that thing because my biggest monster was like 1950 with the Thunderbird, and I didn't get a tour guide for ages, and then he just warninged the tour guide. It was terrible. So Barkion and Bamboo Shoot and any monster that negates traps or anything like that sucks. So what do you do against that? Well, here's where my tech of the week comes in. This is probably my MVP card, besides, the floaters like Wind Up Rabbit and Verz Thunderbird. Black Garden. If you put that card on the board, you can get rid of any of your opponent's monsters. It takes a frickin' obelisk to take down your Verz Thunderbird with that card on the board. And the best thing is, your floater monsters are totally unaffected by Black Garden. You can normal summon them, their attacks could get halved, and then they'll just banish themselves and then come back with regular attack because their effects do not special summon them. So Black Garden, absolutely awesome. This deck can also run out of cards fairly easily. If you don't pull a Cardcar D or a well-timed Max C, you're going to have some issues generating card advantage. So if your opponent clears the board or forces you to use up all your resources, you can run into some trouble. So another tech that's really good for the deck, especially if you are running extra draw power like Legacy, and if you're running a lot of chainable traps, a really good one is Accumulated Fortune. One way that it's really easy to get Accumulated Fortune off is if your opponent activates a spell card and you chain Rabbit and then you chain a Thunderbird and then you chain Accumulated Fortune. That's very good, and even if you have multiple rabbits on the board, you can chain the Thunderbird, chain a rabbit, then chain the Accumulated Fortune, and then chain the other rabbits. So that card is very good for draw power. If there's anything else you guys would like me to discuss about this deck, ask me down in the comments. If you guys would like to see more of the older Tier 2 decks, and of course, once again, let me know in the comments. But that's my deck review for this week. Remember to comment, rate, and subscribe, and this is the RJB0 signing out.